Hi, I'm David Hummels, Dean of the Krannert School. Here is part of an occasional series we are doing highlighting the great research done by Krannert faculty. This is Brian Dineen. He's an associate professor in the organizational behavior and human resources area. Brian, what are you working on?
Yeah, so my co-author David Allen and I have been researching in the world of certifications, and in particular best places to work certifications, or the rankings that are awarded to companies by third parties. We're looking mostly at what happens to these companies in the years following one or more certifications, and looking at two outcomes. One is the quality of the applicants that companies see for their jobs, and the other is employee turnover or retention.
So where do you get data to do a study like this?
Yeah, so years ago I had an HR consultant friend who introduced me to the president of the Best Companies Group, which is an independent group out of Pennsylvania, and they run up to 40 state and industry-based best places to work programs. In fact, one of them is here in Indiana. And we were able to secure some funding through the National Society for Human Resource Management Foundation, the SHRM Foundation, and we're able to get access to 16 of these programs for a period of up to 6 years. And so what this data comprised was over 5,500 companies answering, first of all, an employer survey, which had questions about diversity initiatives, work-life balance initiatives, compensation and benefits, those types of things, as well as outcomes such as turnover and applicant pool quality. And then for each of those companies, up to 100 or an average of 100 employees have to respond to an employee engagement survey.
Okay.
So if you do the math, it's a lot of data.
All right, that's great. So you have all this data, and you're going to do some statistical analysis with it. What'd you find?
Yeah, so the first thing we had to do was kind of establish a baseline for turnover and applicant pool quality, and then track over the next 3 years or 2 certification cycles how many times were companies certified, 0, 1, or 2 times, and then look at the change in turnover and applicant pool quality. Let me just highlight 4 findings. First of all, we did see an overall decrease in turnover, depending on the level of certifications that these companies achieved. We wanted to look also at whether there was a greater bump in turnover or decrease in turnover after an initial certification, or whether it took a few certifications for the effect to kind of kick in.
Okay.
So we call this the celebrity versus the crystallization effect. The celebrity effect happens quickly. Crystallization is kind of like a new product. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a proving period before people buy into it. We actually found more support for that celebrity hypothesis. The effects were actually stronger after initial certification and then kind of wavered off after that, after more certifications.
So how do you separate two kinds of ideas? One is the companies were already great and they already had low turnover from the certification itself affects employee outcomes.
Right, so we had to control for several things. We wanted to control, for example, for a baseline level of employment practices that companies were using.
Okay.
And so looking within these companies, all of whom are good companies to begin with, but really separating out the ones who were certified and tracking the change in turnover and applicant pool quality for those compared to the ones who weren't. So we were able to separate out those 2 groups and study those separately.
So if you're thinking about the implications for someone who runs the HR office in their firm or is making executive decisions about how to make a more friendly workplace, what do you think they should learn from your work?
Yeah, I think there are some implications in terms of the turnover and applicant pool quality. One thing we found with the applicant pool quality, for example, is that it applied more to companies that were smaller rather than larger, so that may be one thing to consider. Another thing we've been thinking about, though, and I was talking to the president of a large organization recently, and I said, certainly you must track these rankings. You must follow these as they pertain to your company or your industry. And he said, we buy into them if we're ranked. The methodology is valid. If we're not, we totally dismiss it. And so
that sounds familiar.
So I think an implication there potentially is there could be pockets of cynicism or doubt about these certifications, especially among employees. So if you take an employee in a company who's certified, maybe that's not their everyday experience for that employee. Could that employee actually become less engaged when they hear the news that their company is ranked as a best place to work? So that's one thing we're looking at. Another thing is the idea that when we raise the reputation of our companies, we also raise the reputation of the employees in those companies. Could we be making them more marketable? Now, we find an overall decrease in turnover in our results, but could there be pockets of employees? Could it be our best employees? Could it be perhaps poor employees, poor performers that could actually leave or use this as a ticket out the door, in a sense?
This is fascinating stuff. Again, this is part of an occasional series we'll be doing to highlight the research here that is both rigorous and relevant. Thanks, Brian, for talking to us, and hope this has been enjoyable for you.
Thank you.